Hello, guys. Welcome to the Haunted Show. I am your host Darshan. I am here with more intense and scary stories. Today we have our guest Sarbajeet Mohanty. Thank you, sir, for coming here.
Thank you so much for inviting me. Thank you so much.
So, sir, tell our viewers about yourself.
Yeah, so my name is Sarbajeet Mohanty, and I'm one of the founders of Parapsychology and Investigation Research Society. It's a registered society that is researching on the phenomena of paranormal and everything around it.
Yeah.
And I've been investigating the paranormal for the last 10 years, and I'm a paranormal investigator, I'm a demonologist, I am an exorcist, and a part-time author too. We have books published, so yeah, that's what it's about me.
Yeah. Sir, how did all this happen when you started?
Yes, so this all began in 2013 to be precise.
Okay.
So, Abhi, technically, if I happen to share, so I'm from Odisha, Bhubaneswar, capital city, and as everyone knows, or most of the people know, Odisha or the eastern part of the country is full of these urban legends and folklores and the ghost stories, very honestly. And I grew up listening to these stories, so it was my day-to-day kind of pastime to sit with friends or family members and talk about these ghost stories. So I realized that as I was listening to these stories, these folklores and everything, these things were actually affecting me in a very negative way. I started developing fear for the paranormal and the darkness. And around that time, fear files and Ahat were very common, very popular. So even though I never watched them, but I used to hear people sharing ke अरे तेरे को पता ही episode में क्या हुआ and everything. So my mind was this, I still have this fascinating mindset where if you give me the beginning of a story, I will create my own story with the elements of my mind and have a proper thing that जिससे मेरे को खुद ही डर लगने लगता है फिर.
Okay.
So now it's a different scene, but back then this is what it used to happen, and because of this constant fear that I used to live in of the darkness, of the paranormal and everything, it started taking a toll on my mind, very honestly, on my emotional as well as on my psychological aspect of my being, and call it my luck or whatever. But because of the job profile that my father has, we had to transfer to different cities every 4-5 years. And now every 4-5 years transfer to hote the, lekin one more thing that used to come with every house that we shifted to was the haunts and the stories that it followed. And now because of my fear of the darkness, I couldn't sleep at night because obviously the room has to be dark for other people to sleep, but the moment something goes dark, I cannot sleep. So I used to stay wide awake the entire night, and during that period I used to see some apparition walking outside the bedroom door, utensils falling on their own, so someone sweeping the room at 2 a.m. of the night, and all those crazy things used to happen, and I was the one to experience because all others were fast asleep. So the very next day I would share the same with my mother, and considering the fact that paranormal is such a taboo in a country like India, my mother was like, "Arey tu kahin se sun ke aaya hai?" So I had no one to share with, very honestly, and it is no one's fault because this is how everyone grows up, with this conditioned mind. These things do not exist, and even if they exist, they cannot do certain things the way things are happening with me. And so these things, they stayed with me with years, and finally we again shifted to one more city. And as I was bracing for the haunts and the hauntings and the spirits to come back to for me to experience them, I had these questions just suddenly coming in, like a psychic thing, like Pooja says, and I had this question in my mind that what is this thing that I'm fearing? Is it something that I've seen on Fear Files and Ahat? Is it something that I've heard from my friends? Is it something what I've heard from my uncles and grandparents? It is something that wears a white sari. It's something that has inverted legs, has long hair and long nails. Is it something that can kill me? The most important question. Can it kill me? Because that's the worst thing that can happen to a human being. And to all these questions, I had no answer. Anything that I was getting in relation to this particular question or to these questions, all I had was these, these answers that I have only watched on TV or I have heard from someone.
Yeah.
There is no proof that these things are correct. There was no proof that these things were true. There was no proof to it. So is it really worth getting scared of them? So then I kind of concluded that maybe I am fearing something that I don't know. Basically, I don't know anything about these
Yeah.
things. It's the only the stories that I've heard. That's
Yeah.
it. So I concluded that I'm fearing something that I don't know, and I'm fearing the unknown. And this was around 2012, and I was at a stage where, like, either I give up myself to this fear or I overcome it. That's the only
Yeah.
way out, because it has affected me a lot. It is still affecting me. And when in 2012 all these questions I had and everything, I then started my research of knowing the unknown. And initially it was just Google or some few books which my father had, or any other information that I could get from anywhere. But then gradually I started meeting a lot of people, because I wanted to know what they thought
Yeah.
would be the real scenario of the paranormal field.
So from that research thing, you started overcoming the fear.
Yes,
Yeah.
I started knowing the unknown, and like I said, I started talking to a lot of people and everything, and that was my way of getting rid of the fear, because as I was trying to know the unknown,
Yeah.
the darkness in me, which was causing me to fear the darkness outside, it started, releasing itself, started receding and all. But during that period of talking to people and understanding their point of views, I realized almost everyone fears unknown, something or the other, not necessarily paranormal.
Yeah.
But everyone fears unknown. A student fears math because the phenomena of math or the formulae of maths is
Yeah.
unknown to him.
Yeah.
Someone always fears something unknown, but there's also a bunch of people who fear the paranormal and the darkness, not because of its reality, but because of the superstition and the myths and the
Yeah.
conditioning they have grown up with.
Yeah.
So I thought maybe, and because I knew of the the effect it had on me and the trauma I went through, I decided that I'm going to help out everyone who is going through something similar.
Yeah.
And during that phase of meeting people and researching, I came across Pooja, who was going through her own episodes on the other side of the country in Mumbai. And while talking to her, I realized that she has also been through all these similar things, but from a very spiritual point of view.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this is a very fascinating thing, because right now we both are kind of on the same line, but dimensionally very different, because as I'm dealing with the physical people, you're dealing with the spiritual people.
Yeah.
Or the spiritual beings. And I said, let's do one thing, and let's get it more professional, let's go more professional, and let's try to help out every single being, living or non-living, who is stuck or needs help.
Yeah.
And that's when in 2016, it took us 3 years actually to to understand each other, to understand what we are trying to work on, what is our what should we work on, how should the people be, what help people need, and kind of do a market research, but not for marketing, but to understand what help people are seeking. And then in 2016 we registered pairs, or
Yeah.
the organization that we are running right now. And yeah, it's been 6 years now of investigating paranormal all over the country and helping out the souls of both the worlds, the living as well as the dead.
But it's so difficult to convince people these things also exist.
It still is.
Yeah.
Still is. There's hardly, there is actually three kind of people. I often say this. There's like three kind of people in India when it comes to paranormal. One are the believers, who are, like people like you, or, the team here right now, who believes in the paranormal and everything. Then there's a second group of people who are non-believers. They will not believe and everything. Then there is a third group of people who are non-believers, but they're open to see that, okay, there might be something that we are not aware of, because of course this universe is ever expanding. There's so many things we have no idea about, we had no idea about 20 years back, and things are coming out. And so there is always a group of people, but convincing is always difficult, because even we now we know, okay, it's no one's fault, because for let's say, for example, a man who is in his 40s or 50s,
Yeah.
for the last 40-50 years he has grown up listening to stories that this is how ghosts are supposed to be, or this is how this is what proves that ghosts or spirits cannot exist.
Yeah.
Now suddenly this person sees that a bunch of paranormal investigators, teenagers, and all who are coming in with this, modern theories, modern gadgets, and saying, okay, this is how spirits are and this is how
Yeah.
they look. Of course it would hit someone's belief system and
Yeah.
everything, and of course it would rattle them. And sometimes this rattling, it comes as a friendly gesture. They were like, hey, acha, ye to humko pata nahi tha. But at times we have got reactions like people have abused us, people have, random people have called us and
Yeah.
have said, okay, that you should stop whatever you're doing, it's all wrong, or we will show you what is right. So
Yeah,
kind of, those frantic warning calls kind
So
of a thing.
extremist, yeah.
Yeah, and but this was back then when we began in 2016.
Mm-hmm.
But now, and I believe it's because so many open-minded people have coming in. Of course, there is a generational shift
Yeah.
too in the society. People are more open to the subject, and even though there's actually a bunch of people who are very much non-believers, but there is another bunch of people who believes in it. But then what we work on, and that's like our mantra kind of,
Yeah.
is that no proof is required for a believer and no proof is enough for a non-believer. So no matter what you do, if they don't want to believe, they will not believe you. But
Yeah.
if someone is a believer, just by staying open, they can believe in something and they can learn a whole lot of things.
Yeah.
So yeah.
How can people know the place is haunted?
So there are a lot of ways actually to find out if a place is haunted or not. Generally, there are a lot of things to notice,
Mhm.
and these things are what we call as weird things that
Yeah.
happens to a person. Now, weird things can be, for example, as we are talking, suddenly the mic drops on its own.
Yeah.
So that is kind of weird because it was standing all fine all day and suddenly it falls without any push or pull. So this is weird.
Mhm.
Or if an object is disappearing and appearing at some other spot, and you are very sure, you are a bachelor, you are very sure that you didn't do that.
Yeah.
And your bike didn't do that. So who did that? How did the such a huge thing? For example, this thing is disappearing from here
Yeah.
on its own and appearing somewhere else. There's a second sign. Third sign is if we are just sitting here and one of the doors just bangs on its own. There is no wind, there is no pressure, there is no gust. How is it banging on its own?
Yeah.
The windows start making a very random noise, like they're banging, without any air, without any air pressure or anything like that.
Yeah.
The temperature of the room drops suddenly.
Hmm.
Now the temperature can drop for many reasons, but if there are no possible reason, how can a temperature just drop suddenly?
Mhm.
And like in fraction of seconds, from 25 degrees that goes to 20 degrees.
Yeah.
So that's a drop I'm talking about. Then hearing footsteps, like someone just walking, and when you go and check, there is no one. Knocks on the doors, scratch marks on the walls, or random things happening in your life. You're getting dreams about this particular entity who is coming and saying you something, and the same entity also appears in the house.
Yeah.
There's this particular term we call as shadow people, where
Yeah.
you just see shadows moving in the house or from the peripheral of your eyes, and a lot of signs actually. Now all these things that I mentioned, they all have their own logical reasons too. And we have to kind of figure out that there is no scientific explanation to it. For
Yeah.
example, even a sudden change of the order or the smell around can also dictate that there is a spirit or not.
Yeah.
If there is a bad smell, then there is an evil spirit around. If it is a good smell, then there could be an angelic good being around. But all these things, like I said, they have their logical reasons. For example, if the temperature is dropping suddenly, we have to see, is the window open, is the door open, is the ventilation open, is that where the wind is coming from?
Yeah.
Because when we are in a state of trying to find out if a place is haunted or not, we kind of forget कि logical reason भी हो सकता है.
Yeah.
We only try to find out, acha, okay, this object just fell on its own, probably the house is haunted.
Yeah.
But the object could just fall because probably you just kicked it without knowing it, or that someone just happened to touch it and it fell. So all these things, before a place is said to be haunted or concluded to be haunted, all these things need to be debunked first, and that's the job of a paranormal investigator.
Yeah.
So that's why we are investigators. We investigate the phenomena.
Yeah.
Why is it happening? Why is it not happening the way it is supposed to be? Why is it not following the basic rule of physics? Why is it not following the basic rule of biology or any other thing for that matter? Air pressure, humidity, how are these things getting affected? So we debunk everything before coming to a conclusion. Now, what is paranormal? Paranormal is everything that we couldn't debunk.
Yeah.
So if there are 10 things happening, 8 things we debunked, so they are logical, they are scientific.
Yeah.
Mainstream scientific, very honestly. But if there are 2 things that our scientific theories are failing to, our gadgets are replying in a very crazy way, our psychics are giving a very weird reaction to that, then that is what we call as paranormal. Things that cannot be explained in a scientific lab or in a scientific condition is what paranormal is. So that's how a person can.
So while investigating, how history of that place is played important role.
So history plays a very important role. Why? Because let's take an example. For example, this place that we investigated, Roha Fort, for example, this place had a history of wars, had a history of people committing sacrifices, people committing suicide. A lot of other things also happened. And when I'm talking about history, it is not just in the 13th century or 18th century, but also 2002 में क्या हुआ था. So anything that has happened at a particular place plays a very major role. Why? Because every incident or every thing that happens at a particular place, a certain kind of emotion is released by the person who is going through that thing. For example, if a person is getting murdered, so is going through certain kind of emotions, and those emotions are released to the environment. When the person who is committing the crime, he is committing in the sense of rage and anger and everything, so particular emotions are also released to the environment. Now these emotions are what kind of act like a battery for the spiritual world or for the spirits to come in and stay at that place. So for example, and why emotions play an important role, if I give you an example, for example, your best friend, if your best friend is happy, if you just stand next to your best friend, you will be happy automatically. You don't need a reason for that. But if your best friend is sad, just stand next to her or him and you'll automatically be sad. Those emotions are not yours. It's basically so energy and the emotions of that particular area, as the phenomena is happening, as the scenario is playing out, play a very important role, not only in the way it affects us, but how it affects the area and the spirits around. So of course the person who is getting murdered, unki spirit to linger karegi, but apart from that, it also attracts other spirits from other areas to come in. So in Roha Fort, we had a lot of spirits who were communicating with us, but our psychics would also sense that there are other spirits which are not as old as these spirits, but they have come in and they're still haunting this place. So history plays a very important role, and that's why a lot of these haunted places we have been through, they may not be famous, but historically they have a lot of importance in terms of declaring a place to be haunted or not, that way.
So thank you so much, Sarbajeet, for coming here and sharing your experience with us. Thank you so much, guys, for watching this video. And if you like this video, please like, share, comment and subscribe to the channel. Thank you.